the Earth, the position of the Earth, the gravitational pulls, how things rotate. And again, we're going to look at some of the early beliefs in different religions and what they thought of the creation. And, it's really important to note that, again, not to sound redundant, but it's a good, valid point that these men, even Job, someone living in the dinosaur days, how would he know such things concerning the earth? I mean, a lot of people want proof of God, and it's like, there's so many ways that you can prove there's a God. Of course, the Bible says creation proves there's a God, the mountains, everything we see. And people say they want proof of God. I told them to look in a mirror, right? I mean, how much more proof do you need than just looking at yourself in a mirror? The question a lot of people struggle with is they want to know, where's God, where did he come from? And, the better question is, where did humans come from, right? I think that's a more general concept the human mind can maybe understand, and you will never understand where God came from, so, don't ask questions you can't obtain or understand answers to. But the better question is, for all of us to be here, there had to be a man and a woman at some point, right? So where did they come from? And I think that's the question people need to answer in their minds. Now, we know in Scripture, we know God created man and he created woman from the man. So we have our answer, but for the evolutionists, they have to explain where did the first man and first woman. I mean, think about this, Shannon. You're going to say you're the closest thing to a scientist we have here. Maybe you are a scientist, I don't know. You play one on TV. I'm going to ask you a question, and play devil's advocate here, because I know you don't believe in evolution. If a single cell evolved and somehow became a person, as ludicrous as that is, and as impossible mathematically as it is, but if it happened, how long would that take? I don't know what the teaching on evolution is as far as the time period of that single cell becoming a human being. I'm guessing millions of years. I mean,
it will take a very long time, because even one cell, some cells might take, no matter how tiny it is, some cells might grow so fast in one day, some could take a whole month to fill even a small gap.
To become a full functioning human being.
It's going to take a million and 1 years.
Right, a million years, right? Say that one cell becomes a man. I don't know if another cell was in the process, or did that one cell, was there another one? What are the chances of it becoming a woman? And then them two getting together and having children. You know what I mean? What are the chances of that? I mean, and again, if it took another million years for that one cell to become a woman, that guy's long gone and dead. I don't see how evolution has a start at all. We're all here, the creations are here. Where did the first man and woman come from to have children? I think that's the better question that our minds can grasp, and we know through Scripture that there's a God and he created them. Their belief is, as Ron said last week, it just happened. These are bright men and women, very smart people with long letters after their names, all the doctorates and degrees, and they're just believing in something that's totally absurd. And it really just tells you there is a devil. From everything God has, the devil has given humanity an alternate reality to believe in. And that's what evolution is. Now, getting past evolution, let's take Big Bang Theory. Okay, evolution, one cell becoming a person, a full functioning person with cognitive thought and the ability to speak, the DNA system, all that, which we know is a little impossibility. But if it were to happen, okay, what about Big Bang Theory? Look at all the things out in the cosmos, the stars, the planets, how they align, how they rotate, how they are in the perfect gravitational pull. One explosion, and all that started, and everything landed perfectly, and is just revolving and rotating. And I mean, when you look at this picture up here, do you realize when you look out at the planets, they're all on the same plane? They're all at the same level. It's not really like that. If you take that picture and lay it down, that's what it is. And every planet. How did the explosion happen? And these things evolved, these planets, moons, sun, stars, they evolved and they land in a perfect position, the same plane with the same rotation. I mean, it's incredible, but it's impossible. But is it impossible if God created it? It's not. But their theories are impossible. They're literally impossible. And Big Bang, they will say, the world's still expanding. Again, Einstein believed it wasn't. He believed it was what they call static, and which means it was not expanding. But it is expanding. You know, again, Christians want to say, what are we going to do for eternity? What we can't see, which is about 98% of what's out there, even that, God is still expanding His universe. I mean, so what are we going to do for eternity? Probably never see it all, is what we'll do for eternity. But how would Job, again, Job lived in basically prehistoric days. Again, he talked about dinosaurs. Job 26, verse 7 says, he stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. I mean, that was cutting-edge science in that day. You know, in a couple slides, we'll look at what, even way after Job, what a lot of these religions thought concerning creation. But why would Job write something like that? Well, how would Job know to write something like that, speaking about our earth, that he stretches out the north over an empty space? What would Job know about the second heaven or outer space? What would he know about that? Nothing. He would know absolutely nothing. You think about the day and time in which we live in. What do you know about it? Exactly. We have the ability to know a little more than Job, but most of us don't care to learn about it. I mean, it's not your thing. It's not your thing. It doesn't make you a bad person. But, you know, I figure, like, God created it, we should know about it. And Job would have not known this. And then concerning the waters, he said he drew a circular horizon on the face of the waters at the boundary of lights and darkness. Again, what's he talking about? A circle. Everything he's talking about here is a circle. It's a big rock, a big circle suspended in nothingness. And again, that's what you would see when you look out, you know, when they visit the moon, there's Earth right there, they visit the moon, and we've all seen the pictures where they look back at the Earth. What do you see? A big planet sitting in nothing. How would Job know these things? You know, it's truly amazing. Now, this is what's called the heliocentric model, but when people had the Earth here in the middle and everything rotating around the Earth, that was called the geocentric model, and that ruled for 1,500 years. But Galileo was the one that was surely given the credit for discovering that that is not what happens, that the sun is in the center and everything else goes around the sun. Meanwhile, the moon's moving. Everything there's moving in perfect synchronicity, and it's because God put it there, not because there was some big explosion. You know, I've been not one time. How many explosions do you think have been in the world since, I don't know either, you know, when the Chinese have been done a long time ago, right? Probably BC. How many explosions do you think we've had in our world? Think of the buildings you take Las Vegas. Casino gets to be like 5 years old there. They're blowing it up and building another one, right? You ever seen anything blow up and it lands across the street perfect and better? Mm-hmm. You ever see, take the tragedy of the Twin Towers when they fell. Think of what it did to everything around it. It didn't make the neighborhood better when they fell. You know what I mean? Its destruction brought other destruction. Destruction never brings perfect, uniformity. And that's what they have to believe in. I don't know which one's, my English is going to be really bad here, more stupid or evolution or Big Bang. I mean,
they're about the same.
They are about the same, and they're both that preposterous. And the funny thing is, our world keeps saying, follow the science, yet none of that is science. So they're not following science at all in their beliefs. And I'm sure to a man, when you get these people privately in a conversation, they doubt what they believe. But they can't not believe it because they're rejecting God in the process. And if you're not ready to receive Christ, then you have to reject it because it's all you have. And it's really sad. It really is sad. Okay, so ancientness, here we go. Some of the things, now remember, we're looking at this because we just read that, he's cold. Wonder why you were sitting that close. Anyway, ancient myths about the earth. Now, again, we just read what Job wrote. Now, Job was just a believer in God. If you said to Job, hey, are you a religious man? Are you Baptist? There was none of that. Job just believed in God and he feared God. So, ancient myths about earth. The Hindus, they believed earth was carried by elephant, standing on the back of a giant turtle. 4 elephants, actually, standing on the back of a giant turtle. And that's their symbol. These are the elephants. They're carrying the earth. And there's a giant sea turtle. Why did they need a sea turtle? Because they knew there was water. And they figured the sea turtle could give them, this is true. The Greeks believe Atlas carried the world on his shoulders. Again, the problem with Atlas was, if he was standing on a pillar, what was the pillar standing on? It's kind of like when they say now that the Martians or aliens brought life to Earth. Okay, where did aliens come from? Right? You just keep going back and back and back. So if Atlas was holding the world and he was standing on a pillar or a column, well, what was the column resting on? And these are the kind of things that just stumped the brightest people in our generations. I mean, you take the Greeks, nobody gave more thought to the topics of their time than the Greeks. I mean, with all the philosophers, and they really thought they were smart. I mean, they really thought they were giving tremendous insight on things, and as what we've discovered now with all the technology we have, they were wrong on just about everything. But at their day and time, they thought they were smart. Who was Job? Like, what was Job's? Was he a philosopher?
No.
What was Job? He was a rich man. He had cattle, and he was probably a pretty simple guy who made a good living, but he wasn't a scientist. So how would Job know things that Aristotle and Plato? How would he know things that they didn't know? You know why? Aristotle and Plato were not men of God, and God was not revealing these things to them. Some scholars thought Earth was flat, resting on pillars. Earth myths are not in the Bible. You don't see any myths about Earth in the Bible. I sound like Mike Tyson. Myths. You don't see any myths in the Bible concerning Earth. Everything you see about Earth in Scripture is factual and has never been debunked by science, because God is the author of science. He's the creator of the world. And look, if anybody knows how it works, it's God. And he did not reveal false intel to the people of the Bible. But, I'm sure, I'm very sure that there are still Hindus that believe that Earth is probably sitting on the backs of 4 elephants and they're standing on the giant field. There'd be no doubt in my mind. But yet they would call you and I crazy for believing in a God and the story of creation, and that Christ came to pay for the sin of the world. They would look at us like we're nuts. Now, spherical Earth, again, I talked about last week, there's still people that believe in a flat Earth. A lot I could say about that. Proverbs 8:27 says, when he drew a circle on the face of the deep, again, indicates that Earth is a globe, it's a circle. Isaiah 40:22, it is he who sits above the circle of the earth. Again, that points to where God remains. Does God remain in our earth or above our earth? He's above our earth. And we'll look at that passage in a little bit where it talks about the 3 heavens. There's more than one heaven. Psalm 103:12, as far as the east is from the west, again, that's consistent with the shape of the earth. Again, so everything in Scripture about the earth is factual. A floating, rotating earth. Job, again, 38, verses 12 and verse 14, says, have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place? It takes on form like a clay under a seal, and stands out like a garment. So the dawn rolls across the earth as it rotates. That's what Job's talking about. The dawn will roll across the earth as what? As the sun's there, and then the sun is rotating around it, the dawn rolls. We know when it's sunny here, it's dark in Australia. And that's what Job's referring to. How does that happen if it's flat? If it's just flat and the earth is shining, everybody's getting everything at the same time. And, and another passage that you could really go to, when Jesus talks in Matthew 24 concerning his return, what does he say? Some will be working in the field, but some will be in their bed sleeping. Again, points to that different time zones. Again, if it was flat, that wouldn't be the case. Job 26:7, 38, verse 6, he stretches out the north over empty space, he hangs earth on nothing. He says, to what were its foundations fastened, or who laid its cornerstone? So again, Job is pointing out that earth is out in space, and it is just literally floating in nothing. What holds us here? Job has no idea what gravitational pull is, but he's referring to it here. That's what keeps the earth from just shooting out into outer darkness, is gravity. Now, when it comes to geology, it's also interesting that Job, again, these men probably were not traveling the world. I can't imagine Job probably left, the circle of where he lived, maybe more than 100 miles, if that. So it ain't like Job would have seen everything and known everything. And Job writes in Job 14, verses 18 and 19, he says, but as a mountain falls and crumbles away, and as a rock is moved from its place, as water wears away stones, and as torrents wash away the soils of the earth. He's talking about rock erosion. Job lived for a while, I'm sure, but I don't know if Job lived long enough to see, rock erosion. It takes a long time for a rock to erode. But yet he knew how it happened. Job 28, 9-10, he puts in his hand on the flint. He overturns the mountains at their roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks. And again, he's talking about many things. Man's efforts in mining, no doubt they were mining back then, but it also talks about runoff and explains about that. He also mentions about springs and the fountains of the deep. Genesis 7:11 says, on that day all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. So when it began to flood, God, yes, it rained for the first time, but he also sprung up the water from the great deep. So imagine the amount of water that came upon the earth at that time. In Genesis 8:2, the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were also stopped. So God can what? He opened them up and he shut them as well. God controls that as well. And none of this is evolution. None of this is, it's all by design. This ain't by happenstance. Water reservoirs of the deep, Psalm 33:7 says, he gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the deep in storehouses. Again, it's talking about the oceanic reservoir. When these men were writing these passages, they didn't have a clue what they were talking about. They really didn't. God was putting in their minds what to write. They probably really didn't understand a lot of what they were writing. God makes it clear in Scripture that the Old Testament prophets, many of them had no understanding of the things God was telling them to write. They even go tell the people. They didn't need to understand. They just needed to be the mouthpiece of God. So when they're writing these things, it ain't like they really understood what they were talking about, but God was giving us proof not only of his existence, but his power as well. 2 Samuel 22:16 says that the channels of the sea were seen, the foundations of the world were uncovered. So it talks about valleys and the seas. Glaciers and uniformitarianism. Job 38:29-30 talks about that. Now, I don't really know where Job lived, but I really have to wonder if Job ever really saw ice. I mean, think about it. They lived in the Palestinian region. I doubt if he was seeing glaciers. So, how would Job known about glaciers, quite honestly? He says, from whose womb comes the ice, and the frost of the heaven who gives it birth. The waters harden like stone, and the surface of the deep is frozen. Would he have known that? Would he have seen that with his own two eyes? Probably not. Maybe some visitor could have told him about it, but probably not. Again, I think Job's just recording what God told him to write, but talking about the glacial period. And 2 Peter 3:4 and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. And this is the warning of uniformitarianism. Talking about things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Principles of isostasy. And I don't know, I'm not a professor of isostasy, but basically the basics of isostasy talks about the Earth's crust and how things will come out of the crust and things will lower in the crust. It's always balancing itself out. That's kind of what I know about it. Shindu could probably tell me more about it, but that's about what I know. What I know is you'll have mountains in some areas, the Himalayas, they're still growing. They're still getting bigger. I think it's Greenland. It's actually lower than sea level, and it's got ice on it. If that melted, all of that would go into the water and actually raise the entire sea level. So there's a lot of that going on. It's up and down in nature, and things pushing up and things going down. The islands of Hawaii, volcanic weather, that's another principle of isostasy. It's got a lot to do with the Earth's crust, voids in the crust, and it'll balance itself out. That's how God has made the crust of our world. It's quite amazing. Isaiah 40:12 said, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, measured heaven with a span, and calculated the dust of the earth in a measure, weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance. Says, who laid the foundations in Psalm 104, 5-9? Says, who laid the foundations of the earth? And again, when it's talking about the foundations of the earth, it's talking about the earth's core, the earth's crust, and it's really talking about the principle of isostasy. As little as I know about it, I'm sure Job and the psalmist, they knew even less than I did. So the level of the Earth's crust is determined by its density. Lighter materials rise, forming continents, mountains, plateaus. Heavier materials sink, forming basins and ocean floors. And the Earth is balanced. I would wonder if it would be a really wonderful study if somebody would go around the world and measure all the things that are low and sinkholes and stuff like that versus all the things that are high. And I would guarantee you'd come out with a conclusion that everything is perfectly balanced. Which is amazing when you look at the mountains. I mean, there's that many things low. But when you look at they discovered Yellowstone National Park was an entire indentation through NASA imagery. You wouldn't know by walking in it, but through NASA imagery, they determined that entire area of Yellowstone National Park is a caldera volcano. And they only discovered that because it's sinking, that's right. But what we do know about the Earth's crust is unless it starts to sink, it provides pressure, and one day that bad boy is going to blow. And they say if that blows, that could be a cataclysmic event, truly. And that's in what, Montana, I think.
Never been here.
Me neither. But I know Hawaii's in Hawaii. Okay. Hydrology. So you see the word hydro has to do with water. Ecclesiastes 1-7. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. So the hydrologic cycle was understood by man only in the 17th century. So you figure it wasn't until the 1600s, which is only 400 years ago. I mean, it sounds like a long time ago. It's not that long ago. The hydrologic cycle was never understood by man until the 1600s. And what is that? You think about it. These streams that are flowing to the oceans, how does the ocean just not get too full? You know what I mean? And how do the streams always keep flowing? Again, these are not easy things for man to understand, but look at what Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes 1:7. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. He was describing the hydrological cycle. Again, now Solomon may have understood it because he was the wisest man that's ever lived, but surely it wasn't understood by men until the 1600s. But Solomon wrote that in 935 BC. So 2,500 years before man really came to the understanding of the hydrological cycle, Solomon was writing about it in the Bible. Now what's important is you won't see any of these other historical figures in their writings writing about these things. Whatever they wrote was wrong. Whatever the man of the Bible wrote was right. And that's not just, they weren't guessing. You couldn't guess at these things. So 1,100 billion gallons of water per hour flow into the sea, but yet the sea does not fill up. Jim, did you figure that out? How many gallons of water it was? 1,100 billion gallons of water floated into the sea. Think about that, though. Where does it all go? You would think the sea would fill up after a while, but it doesn't. Isaiah 55:10, for as the rain and the snow come down from the heaven, and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. So the world's food supply is made up possible because of the distribution of water. When that man came out to drill my well at my house in 2004, he showed me an underground map of waterways and veins, and he said, you've got oceans down there. He said, you would not believe the amount of water down here. Now, how they put that on a map, I don't know. But he said that he told me at my house, he said, where your well is, he said, you would never run out of water. He said, it is such a large body of water down there. And it's amazing to me that here on our Earth's crust we have water, but yet at the core we basically have fire. We basically have molten metal at the core of the Earth. And it's that metal which creates which keeps the magnetic pull. It's really interesting how God has put metal in the middle to be like keep us where we need to be, magnetically speaking. And you think about all these intricate parts on the human body, but what God did to the world and these planets to keep them in place, and all that came by an explosion of what was it, an atom? I don't really know what they're saying exploded. I don't really know. How about electricity and rain? Now, when was electricity discovered? Ron, you were alive.
100 years ago.
Okay, Ron was here. About 100 years ago. But when the psalmist wrote, and Jeremiah was written, 600 years BC? He says he causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain. And he's talking about evaporation occurs after a multitude of waters in the heavens descends, and its relation of electricity to rain. Jeremiah 10:13, he makes lightning for the rain. He brings the wind out of his treasuries. Again, it's a reference to electricity. Did they understand electricity? No. Did they understand how to run, what Tesla and Edison and all these guys did? No. And the only reason they didn't understand that is because it wasn't the time for man to understand that. God was withholding certain technologies from us until the last days in which we are in now. And you think about it, that's why he told Daniel in chapter 12 that Daniel was going to shut the book and seal it, because it's just not relevant for your time. It's not relevant for your people now. Because people get sidetracked with things that don't have anything to do with anything. And God didn't want people getting sidetracked with his return in Daniel's day, because it wasn't going to happen for centuries, a millennia. So it's kind of like that. Like, they understood the power of electricity. I'm sure these men saw lightning bolts strike things and fry things and cause fires, and you could feel the power of a rumble and all that stuff and the power of electricity. But still, they were understanding the concept of the rain and the storms and the lightning concerning electricity. And it's really quite amazing. With the clouds and the vapor and the rain, Job, again, a lot of this is in Job because Job was questioning so many things of God concerning his own life and why he was letting all these horrible things happen to him while evil people seemed to be getting away with it. And, Job was questioning a lot of things. Of course, God came to him and asked him a lot of questions he couldn't answer. So Job 26:8, chapter 37, verse 11-16 says, He binds up the waters in his thick clouds, yet the clouds are not broken under it. Also with moisture, he saturates the thick clouds. Do you know how the clouds are balanced? So he's talking about condensation from clouds which hold water mysteriously, and clouds can weigh billions of tons each. You ever think about that? With a rain-filled cloud? You think of like one cloud, how much rain it can drop. Isn't that really amazing when you think about that? How God has designed rain to be traveled by these clouds, and how does a cloud that you put your hand in hold water and drop rain? He didn't understand it, but he knew what was going on through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Job 36:27-28 says, For he draws up the drops of water, they distill in his mist and rain, which the skies pour down and drop on mankind abundantly. So he's talking about not only precipitation, he's talking about evaporation as well. And what's going on now is, what's the place in Maryland that's had the 100-year floods like 3 years?
Ellicott City.
Ellicott City. So they've had 100-year floods, 2 times in the last 5 years. So what's happening now is, when you see a normal rain shower, it's God's way, right? So what's happening now is, in what's going on in our world right now, not only are our poles shifting, and we don't really know what that's going to do. That's never happened in the history of man being able to be around. Okay, it's happened before, but nobody was living to record what happened. So the poles are shifting. North is becoming south, and south is becoming north. That's happening. What also too is happening is, if I can draw on the board, which I'm going to. I'll lose everybody at home with it. Tough noogies. I don't want to draw what's going on in our world right now concerning out in space. I'm going to draw it down below. So, if you have our world right now, I got a worse color I can grab. Sorry. Only I can see it. It's like so pink. There we go. Okay, so that's our world. So just assume this is the North Pole, which it's not. And again, these are shifting. So all your compasses are going to be going out of whack. So out of the North Pole, there is an escape, and then the South Pole is an escape. So what happens is it puts off this, they shoot out and just consistently go around the Earth. That's called the Magnetosphere, right? You're not sure something's called in space, it's always ended with the word sphere. That is what protects our Earth from some incoming space trash, right? If it's not real, like massive, and it'll hit that kind of deter. But really, what this protects us from is all the damaging rays, which are such as what? Wear glasses because we don't want to get ultraviolet rays, X-rays, gamma rays, like things made incredible. All these rays are dangerous rays coming out of space. So the magnetosphere protects us from that. Well, and this is scientific fact, this is really weakening right now. And it's probably because the poles are shifting. So this magnetosphere is really weak right now. So what does that mean if you have a weak magnetosphere? It means these rays
More penetration.
correct. Twofold on that. Not only is it more damaging, so that's why they're saying more gamma rays, more X-rays, more of those. So for you and I, what does that mean? Greater chances of cancer. Okay? So we know cancer is rising. And if the government really cared about our health, they would be trying to cure cancer and not worry about a vaccine. So they don't care. Okay, so it's bad for humans, for us, right? Now, this rain that we're talking about, why are we having 100-year storms every 3 years? You know why? These rays come in and they charge our atmosphere. You don't get normal rains anymore. A normal rain is a nice, dousing rain. Good for the crops. That's how God designed it. these clouds or these gray skies that we're seeing for the most part, they're not normal clouds. They're filled with these gamma rays and X-rays and ultraviolet rays, and they produce water. But what happens is when they break loose. And that's why we're having all these floods. Now, you think about this. We're in the last days. God says, sea waves roaring, all these things are going to be happening before he returns. So is this weakening just because it's weakening? It's weakening because God's making it weaken, because he's bringing in other things, which is going to affect the weather. Why are they keep talking about climate change? They need something to blame Christians for. But they know what's going on. There's nothing they can do about this. Now, there's another problem. So it's affecting humans. It's affecting our rain, which affects humans. And the other thing, guess what it does? When all these rays start coming in, and they're not hitting humans, you know what they're hitting? They're hitting the ground. You know what it does to the ground? It supercharges the ground. That's why we're going to have more earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. And what did the Lord say before he returned? We're going to see earthquakes in diverse places, meaning you're going to see earthquakes where they normally happen, but you're going to see a bunch of earthquakes where they don't normally happen too. You know why? Because these rays come in and they charge the particles in the ground and they disturb the ground. And that's why we're seeing an uptick in earthquakes, volcanic. I mean, look what's going on in Spain and La Palma. The volcanoes are going off. But this is what's happening. And I'm telling you, it's all a result of our magnetosphere is weakening. Again, that's that invisible protective layer God designed to go around our Earth to help shield off these rays and space trash and other things like that. Well, it's weakening, so everything's starting to go through. Think about again, when we talk about the Lord's return, the first 4 trumpet judgments all have to do with what? A massive meteor. Well, guess what? It's going to come right in because, again, this is like a protective net, I guess is the best way to explain it, around the world. And that net is weakening and it's being exposed. And because of that, it's changing the dynamic of our Earth. And it's not because it's not like God doesn't know what's happening. God's causing it to happen. And again, when we see all these floods, when you see these deluges of water, when you see cities getting 10 inches of rain in an hour, that's not the way God designed rain. Unless God is judging somebody. But when you see a sky that's downpouring, and you don't really see those cumulus clouds, understand it's because of these rays coming into your atmosphere, and that's why it's just downpouring. And we've had some of those this past year. I mean, I think about our roof out there. We had a couple of leaks, but we're thinking, well, was it only leaking because of it rained 3 inches in 1 hour? You know what I mean? We've had a lot of rains like that. And it's for this reason. And it's only going to get worse. Not sound like Johnny Rainbow, but it's going to get worse. And understand why God's doing all these things. It's one part judgment. Alana, you just missed my drawing on the Earth and the magnetosphere and all that. Would you like me to review?
Yes.
Too bad. Nobody else wants to hear it again. But we're talking about these downpours of rains, and we're talking about the magnetosphere weakening and all the rays coming in. Not only is it affecting the weather, it's affecting us as humans again, and it is going to make cancer rates go up. And 3, it's affecting the ground, supercharging the ground. We have volcanoes, we have earthquakes. And Jesus says when you see all these things, look up. And again, this is weather. We know it's a sign of Christ's return. We know it's a sign of Christ's return, at least some of us do. Most Christians still don't care, and I think God could come down and slap them in the face and say, hey, I'm coming soon, and they still wouldn't care. Again, it's just, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. And I don't even think Christ can make them drink, quite honestly. And it's really sad. But when I say that, I say this because every time we see things like this happening, it is maybe God's judgments to a point, but the Bible talks about when the earth is groaning, and every time the earth shakes or a volcano blows up, God is trying to get the attention of people. It's like God has had these celestial signs, these blood moons, all these stars, all these things aligning in heaven, all these celestial signs. Most Christians are like, oh, that's interesting, but whatever, it doesn't affect my life. And then, God has got these things kicking down, the earthquakes, the volcanoes, and sea waves are roaring. I mean, last year we ran out of the alphabet with hurricanes, did we not? Did we have to start over in the alphabet?
Yeah.
It's going to do it again this year, I'm pretty sure. And God's trying to get people's attention, and they're, whatever. I'll still serve myself, and I'll make myself my God, and I'm most important, and, it's my rest, it's my this, my that, what I want. And it's like, again, and I don't know what it's going to take for some people to wake up. What more can God do than make the blood red, the moon red, and all these? What more can He do? Shake the earth? I mean, what more can He do to get the attention of human beings? short of splitting heaven up. But again, God's not wanting us to believe because we can see. You know what I mean? He wants us to believe by our faith. What more can God do? I mean, think about your life. If God's brought judgment into your life, or God says something in your life, what more does he have to do? Does he got to bring more? I mean, because if you didn't get it the first time, he will. You know what I mean? It's like, what do you need? What do I need? What does God need to do? We didn't escape anything. You know what I mean? It's like, what does God have to do to get some of our attention?
People can't see what's going on right now in this world.
No.
Then you're never going to see.
You're never going to see.
Because it is so evident, the evil and wickedness in this world. And the Bible is just coming, it's like the book is open and it's saying, here I am, read me. The word, it's there. It's all here.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Again, I'm not hung up on the vaccine or whatever. You want to get it, whatever. All I tell people is this. Look at the people telling you to do something. That's all you need to do. If someone's evil, and the majority of the people are evil, just downright evil, and they want you to do something really bad, do you think evil people care about you? No. You just look at the source. If you trust somebody, you trust them. If you don't, you don't. You know, and that's all I'm telling people. Just consider the source. And that's why the Bible is so beautiful. That's why I love the Bible and I love the Lord, because I consider the source. And I know everything I read in this Bible, the source is God. When I pray, it's to God. When I look out into creation, I know it's here because of God. And whenever I do anything in my life, that's one of my basic fundamental foundations is consider the source. If somebody comes to me and says something to me and they're a gossip, I consider the source, right? If somebody comes to me and they've been trustworthy in my life for 30 years, I won't question it when they tell me something. Right. Consider the source. That'll get you really far in life. It really will. And it'll stop you from falling into a lot of trap. I mean, if a con man comes into you, button-up shirt, gold chain, sleazy looking, he wants you to invest in a property in Arizona, would you do it? Probably not, right? You know, it's like, just consider the source. And when it comes to creation, everything around us, you can either believe Stephen Hawking or you can believe God. Right. When Jesus says, I'm the only way to heaven, and Oprah says there's many ways, consider the source. Right. You got the devil on one hand telling you there's many ways, you got Jesus, God in the flesh telling you he's the only way. Consider the source. Right. You know, so that's all I tell people, consider the source. And you can make a lot of good decisions by doing that. Hydrological balance, Job 20:25. And he gave to the wind its weight, and apportioned the waters by measure. So wind has weight, did you know that? Wind has weight. Air has weight, and exerts pressure. That's how we get barometric pressures and such things. Air has weight. Only known since 1643 with the invention of the barometer. But here we have Job, who lived in prehistoric days, talking about wind has weight and waters by measure. Again, these are things that Job wouldn't have understood. I don't think the average person back in Job's day would have understood wind has weight. Would you? I would. How would Job know wind has weight? Without a barometer, how would he know anything about barometric pressure? There might be certain days where he got a headache or something, we're going to get some cold air or something, but I don't believe anybody back then would know wind had weight. But Job wrote about wind having weight in Job 28:25. Average storm cloud weighs 10 billion tons. Isn't that incredible? Who weighed a cloud? Who did that? How do they know that? Who weighed a cloud? Right. We're going to find that out. At 45 miles per hour equal to 40 atomic bombs. This is crazy. Relative weights of air and water are needed for the hydrological cycle. So it's really amazing. You know, we even just look at like rain. Okay, rain goes down, soaks into the ground, the trees suck it up, they give the water back into the atmosphere, transpiration. This cycle, and without trees, we wouldn't have oxygen. We need trees. And, if the world was so concerned about the air we breathe, they would tell people quit cutting trees down. Right. And stuff like that. But they have masks on everybody's face because they think your carbon dioxide is polluting the air, and it is not, because foliage needs carbon dioxide to grow. Right. So therefore, by masking everybody, they're hurting the environment. And they know that. You know why? They've made the environment their agenda, and if it's not hurting, then they have no agenda. Right. So they're actually promoting things that hurt the environment to actually make their cause look like it's worthwhile. Makes sense? If you're evil, it does. And our government's evil. Meteorology. Ecclesiastes 1:6 again. Ecclesiastes written by Solomon. The wind goes towards the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. So he's talking about circulation of the atmosphere, not discovered until much, much later. Remember, Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes over 900 years before Jesus was ever born. So wind circuits impacting airplane flight times. They have tailwinds, right? They're going to get there quicker. If they got headwind, they're going to take hours. Across country, it'll take them hours longer. Isaiah 40:22 is he, speaking about God, who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. So again, he's talking about the protective effect of the atmosphere. What's the big problem today? The ozone layer. Really? Does the ozone layer affect your life? Would you know if the ozone layer was good or not? You wouldn't have a clue, right? But what do they keep saying on the news? Ozone layer is depleting, it's depleting, it's depleting. And it's not the massive factories in China or India. It's your breathing. It's cows farting. That's what's hurting the atmosphere. It's that gas-powered car you drive. Really? Like if you got these factories in China, basically with no emissions. Where's everything made in the world? Do you think China is producing any smog at all? In our atmosphere? Can you imagine? Do you know when the Lord returns, he talks about burning up this atmosphere? Do you know why? It's so polluted. We wonder where cancer comes from. It comes from these rays I'm talking about. It comes from the food we eat. It comes from the water we're drinking. But it also comes mainly from the air we breathe.
Depletion of oxygen.
That's right. And look, they want here what they had to do in China. They wear masks everywhere. And that's what they're trying to do here. It creates a compliance of society. Everybody, they just look like a bunch of faceless robots at that point. Because that's all we are to them.
Right.
We're just pawns on a chessboard.
Right.
When I play chess, I could care less about the pawns. Look, they're just there to get rid of. I play chess and I lose all the time, so maybe my whole thought process is wrong. But I'm just like, two at a time moves, off the get-go, let's try to get them out of the way so I can start bringing out my big pieces. And that's always a mistake, and I know somebody watches Rose, I play chess right now saying he's an idiot. And when it comes to chess, I am an idiot. But that's how I play. I don't care about the pawns, they're just in the way. But that's how the government views you and I. They don't look at you as a rook or a knight. They look at you as certainly not a king or a queen, that's them. Or a bishop. They look at you like a pawn. You're just in the way. And then when you think about it, a liberal who aligns up, politically speaking, with them is still a pawn, the peasant out here. They don't care for them, but they don't hate them. Now, you take a pawn that doesn't think like them and believe like them, especially if you're a Christian, they really hate you now. And you understand that's where we're at in the society right now. We are pawns that are willing to be sacrificed in their eyes, especially Christians. And again, the whole talk about environment is not going away. The Pope is pushing that. He's creating a religion concerning, for the environment. He's literally creating an environment religion. And the Vatican has endorsed him to do that. And it's called Sustainable Development. And the UN is also endorsing and part of sustainable development. And part of sustainable development is much to do with the atmosphere, the earth, and all those things. So, and again, as I said Sunday, who are they saying the ecological terrorists are? It's you and me. Yeah. And we're not. You guys garden, you take care of your yard, we don't throw trash away. Look, it's a Christian's duty to take care of the earth. Didn't it start with Adam and Eve? Yeah. God told Adam after he sinned, look, now there's going to be thorns and thistles and weeds, and you're going to work this stuff. You're going to work it. You're going to take care of this garden. You didn't have to, but now you have to because of the sin you committed. And look, every Christian should be not an environmentalist, but we should care about our planet. Why? Because God created it. It's like, it's not that it's true. It's just if you say something enough times, people start to believe it. And I'm telling you, that's the narrative. And it has been the narrative for a while. They're just increasing the narrative that Christians are eco-terrorists. Because, again, we believe in another world. We're escaping to another world. We don't care how we leave it. That's like saying Christians don't care how they leave their hotel rooms before they go back home. Is that true? Monty will make the bed. Man, I'll vacuum. We make it look as neat as probably better than before we came in. That's really what they're saying. Okay, because we stayed in a hotel room for a while, we don't care what shape we leave it in because we're escaping back to our house. That's really what they're talking about when they say, like, this world yes, we are passing through this. I would tell a liberal to their face, or whoever wants to accuse me of being a terrorist, yeah, this is not my real home. One day I will live in with God and His kingdom. But that doesn't mean I don't care about this one now. Because the Bible tells us to be good stewards of everything. Be good stewards. And, could I be better? Probably. I'm going to say this on camera. Not a big recycler. I don't know really. I don't know. Hey, Stephen Colbert, when he interviewed Little Earth, he admitted he's the biggest hypocrite of all, so go attack him. And they are hypocrites. When you look at these bozos that are pushing all this stuff, they fly around in their private jets. They ride around in much bigger gas-burning cars than you and I, limos and stretch Humvees and all these things. They live in mansions that burn massive amounts of electricity. They could care less about the environment. It's do what I say, not what I do. And that's always the devil's message, is do what I say. Don't watch what I do, but do what I say. Again, you can go back and look at that interview with Stephen Colbert. He admits concerning the environment, he's a massive hypocrite. He says it, right? I mean, why he said it, I don't know. It's almost like the truth just came out of him for once and he couldn't stop it. Snow, hail, and frost, real quick, Job 30:22. Have you entered the treasury of snow, or have you seen the treasury of hail? So he's talking about snow and hail. Psalm 147:16, he gives snow like wool, he scatters the frost like ashes, snow and frost. And again, it may not sound significant that Job is talking about snow, but how much snow do you think Job was seeing living in a desert region? Probably none. I'd say none. But yet he knew about snow and hail. And, I doubt if he was seeing a lot of hail there either, but yet he talked about that. And the psalmist, again, living in the same area, he talks about snow like wool. He scatters the frost like ashes. And I'm not saying it doesn't rain or snow in Israel, because it does. But I don't think they were seeing much of it, quite honestly. So we'll pick up here next week talking about oceanography. And we'll probably get through this next week. But we're going to see some of the different scientists and what they believe concerning these things. And again, it's amazing when you look at what these guys do concerning oceanography. Now, to me, it's amazing when they talk about things in space and even the patterns of rain and the wind having weight and all the things they wouldn't have known without modern technology. But think about oceanography. You think Job was out sailing the seven seas? None of these people were. The psalmists weren't. They weren't. There wasn't even really ships back then to be out doing these things. They might have had little boats that could go a little bit of ways, but they weren't taking 8-foot dinghies out into the ocean. I promise you, they wouldn't have made it. So how would they have known about these different plotted courses in the ocean and all that? Again, without God and the knowledge that God was giving them, there is zero chance they would have known these things. Absolutely zero. I still look at people today that are confused about space. And even this, people argue the different currents and things of ocean and all. Someone mentioned to me about, you can't see stars from space. And that's one of those things that stuck years ago, but it's not true. You can see stars from space, but there are people out here that believe you can't see stars from space, and nobody can answer that question. Why we can see them here, but we can't see them from space? You can see them from space. But what happens is when they're shooting a picture of the International Space Station, and it's real bright, and people see that it's just dark behind it, there's no stars. Well, what's happening is these cameras, the shutters are not so fast, and what they're doing, the object is bright, and it focuses on the International Space Station, it drowns out the background. Same thing when the moon is lit up from the sun, you can't see the stars because it's washing out the stars. And it comes from one of the Apollo missions where one of the astronauts, I forget which one, said he couldn't see the stars. But he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about when they were on the sun side. On the dark side, you can see all the stars you want to see. So you can see the stars. It's just if there's a light there, just as it is here, I can see stars in my house. As soon as my outside light comes on, I can't see anything because the light's drowning them out. So you can see stars in space. That's a fact. But it's just when something gets said enough times, it becomes fact with a lot of people. But the fact is, if you really do study it, you can see stars. They don't disappear. In fact, you can see the stars clear in space. You don't need telescopes, as we would here. So, all right, we'll stop there. There's a lot going on. So far, does everybody believe in God? Okay, we're doing good. If this turns you the other way, I'm going to just stop. So, it's truly amazing what God revealed to man. I mean, this is just looking at it from a scientific standpoint. Obviously, we know by just take the book of Revelation. A man living in 90 AD to write what he sees in Revelation. Without God, there's no way John could have even imagined to write the stuff he wrote. I mean, the scenes that he wrote about in heaven, the future scenes of war, there's no way he could have wrote about those things. Impossible. And again, to me, one of the strongest avenues for the proof of God is just prophecy in general. When you see prophecy, I like looking at prophecies that were foretold in Genesis. You can go back in the Old Testament and look, whether it be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 years later, it happened exactly the way God said it would happen. And, we see things that God predicted for our future, and it's happened. When we see those scenes in heaven, it's not if they're going to happen. They're going to happen. When God talks about the Battle of Armageddon, we can't pray that away. You can't, God, please don't let Armageddon happen. It's already been recorded. It's going to happen. So we have to understand God is not 90% accurate in prophecy. He's 100% accurate. And what he says is going to happen is going to happen. When God says it was appointed for all men to die and then the judgment, guess what? Unless you are alive at the return of Christ, you're going to die, and immediately you're going to go stand in judgment for your salvation or for your lack thereof. And people don't understand the basis of their judgment is based on the decision they made for Christ. And I like what Billy Graham has always said in his messages when he would go after these massive groups. Everyone here tonight will make a decision about Jesus Christ. Everyone will. You're either going to say yes, no, or maybe. That's a decision. When the gospel's presented, it's a decision. And it's like one of my messages I wrote. He talked about a guy he met, and he was an evangelist too. And he told Billy Graham, he said, "I want to be a fork in the road for everybody that I come in contact with." He says, when I talk to them and I give them Christ, they have a chance, yes or no. He says, I want to be that fork in the road that gives people that opportunity to at least make a decision about Christ. They could be walking around oblivious, and here he comes to a fork in the road, and that's what every Christian should be, a fork in the road. But sadly, most Christians could care less about other people's salvation. They're probably not even saved themselves, and they're too busy serving themselves, not Christ. It's about their rest, their pleasure, their wants, their needs. It's not about what Jesus wants them to do. It's about me first, and then I'll fit Jesus in if I have time. And it will be that way till the end of time. I can talk till I get blue in the face, and it'll still be that way. Until somebody gives their heart to God, there is nothing I can say to increase their attendance, their service, their giving. Nothing I can say. All the messages I preach are basically useless until they decide to surrender their life to Christ. Amen. And that's a fact. And that includes me too. So, any questions about isostasity or hydrology or... I'm going to direct every question to Jim now.
Yeah, quiz on this later, right?
Huh?
Yeah, quiz on this later, right?
We will, yes. Okay, let's pray. All right, Lord, we thank you for this day. Lord, we just, again, there's so many things to pray for, a lot of family dysfunctions and church dysfunctions and the world dysfunction, government dysfunction. I can't think of anything that there's not dysfunction in, Lord. So we just pray for all. Lord, we just pray for the peace of Christ to come in people's hearts through repentance and salvation. Lord, pray for our leaders, pray for our nation. They are wicked, they are evil, Lord, most of them, and I pray for their salvation. Pray for our world. I pray for the poor people in Australia that are just being ruled by tyrants, and Lord, it's just horrible. Pray for their release from that. I pray for people to use their God-given brain and stand up and fight for their rights, because if they take these rights, trust me, they're going to keep taking more under the call of executive orders. And Lord, we know it's leading to the system of Antichrist. People right now are losing their jobs because they won't get vaccinated because they feel like it's their body, their choice, and it's so sad that we live in a country and a world where they're forcing people to lose their jobs over it. They're forcing pregnant women to take something that they've already proven is damaging to their reproductive systems, and it's just really sad what's going on. I pray for our children in our schools that they would take these masks off their face that are causing more damage than good. There's been hidden cameras coming out, Lord, you know the truth more than we do. Hidden cameras of reports of these scientists saying these kids don't need this vaccine, and they know they don't need it, and it's all about money and power, and it's just so sad what people are doing to our children out here. Not only are they aborting them, now they're putting something in their body that is very damaging to them, and they know it is, and they know it's not anything that these children need, which is really sad. It's all about the love of money. It's all about power. And Lord, we just pray for something to change, not only just in our nation, but in our world, at least for our children's sake. Lord, we really pray for them. And Father, we just pray for the church to wake up, to come out of the slumber they're in, and not just for a week or two, but to permanently come out of it. Not just, I'm in it for a week or two, but, to just come out of themselves and see themselves and see their need for you daily, Lord, and get the recharge they need from your word, from church service, from the fellowship of church. And Lord, we just live in a world that's so anti-Christian, so anti-church now. And sadly, many Christians are starting to believe that way, and it's really sad. Lord, I pray for the backbone of this church, Lord. I pray that we don't get tired. I pray that we don't grow weary. I pray that we don't give up. Just like the human, the back is always the thing that gets the most sore because it's used the most. And the backbone of the church gets used the most, Lord. So I just pray, Lord, you would bring people into our church that would assist us in our work here to help us do it. And if you don't, Lord, that's fine too. We just pray for you to sustain us and keep us here. But we really pray for people to come alongside and really be dedicated, not this weak dedication, 2 week dedication, but really be dedicated, not to our church, but to you, Lord, and just to be of service. So, Father, keep us safe as we leave here. Lord, bless our offering.